Hello and welcome to High Key Growth, the podcast for early stage founders, solopreneurs, and marketers looking to achieve rapid growth while running lean. I'm your host, Gina Gregorick, and I am so excited to welcome today three-time founder, one-time exit as of extremely recently. We have the founder and chief innovation officer at the recently acquired Idelic, and my good friend, Hayden Cardiff. Hayden, welcome to the show.
Gina, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be on and looking forward to it.
I'm so excited to have you on and talk a little bit more today. It's funny because I actually have a lot of background on Hayden because we did work at Idelic together forever, still in some capacity.
Probably too much background, Gina.
Probably way too much background. So a lot of this I do actually have some insight into. So we're going to be digging a little deeper because knowing Hayden personally, he has kind of that secret sauce, I think, to really make a startup a success. So I'm excited to chat a little bit more kind of about your journey and where you've come from. So to really kick us off, for those folks who haven't spent the better part of the last 8 years with you, can you give the listeners just a quick background on you, where you've come from, where you've been?
Yeah, absolutely. So entrepreneurship has been one of those things that has really been a calling for me. Like, I think a part of it is just intrinsically I knew that no company would want to hire me, so I had to go create my own job. So no, but it's been a really fun journey. So you mentioned three-time entrepreneur. The first two were short-lived just because we made lots of good mistakes, lots of learnings. They spanned from music technology company to looking at electric vehicle technology in the trucking space, which led me to ultimately where I ended up and landed being a little bit more of a takeoff, which was Idelic. And so that's been a fun journey over the last decade. And Idelic ultimately is a driver management platform in the trucking and transportation space, ultimately being able to take AI and machine learning, data analytics to be able to help understand and predict which drivers are most at risk, give coaching workflows, and allow fleets to be able to prevent crashes before they happen. So making sure that we can bring drivers home safe each and every night. That's the goal. And so that's the mission that we've been driving towards over the last 10 years. And it has been such a fun journey, a roller coaster as always when you're dealing with early venture-backed startup, but a lot of good turns nonetheless. And it's been fun to be able to look at the next stage of growth for us here.
Heck yeah, I can say firsthand it has been a ton of fun. Well, first off, congratulations. This is
Thank you.
Crazy big news, an incredible time. What an end of an era for Idelic and all of us who have been there in the past. So I guess my first question really is, was this how you expected Idelic's journey to play out, or has it unfolded kind of differently than you imagined in the early days?
I mean, you can never pinpoint exactly how things are going to unfold. So definitely some unexpected turns. But I think throughout the entire journey, the understood path was build something valuable, build something unique, build something that is going to bring good value to the market, and people will want to acquire that. And so I think that was always the ultimate path, right? More so than say IPO or something along those lines. It's very much so, build up something meaningful and then be able to have a strong exit. So for us, that was kind of the path overall. But man, how to get there was definitely a little bit more unexpected and took some turns that we couldn't foresee. But ultimately, we were able to shake and shimmy and learn and grow and be able to finally get there.
Yeah, and I think really what you're hitting on here with like the meaningful piece is so important because, like, let's be honest, like trucking isn't the most like sexy space you can be in. Shocker. But I think working towards something positive and having a positive impact, I mean, safety, you're literally saving lives. And I think that that's a really important piece of like what helped get all of us through over the hump when those days were hard and things were tough and the late nights at the office.
Absolutely. I think having a mission is so critical to the success of any entrepreneur, right? And that mission can be varied, right? But I think back to the early days when, even back in grad school, studying entrepreneurship and thinking what I wanted to do. Like I would see certain companies that, had these big exits, but they were like creating emoji apps and things like that. Like it just, like, it felt so hollow to me that I couldn't get behind it, even if the dollars and the money was there, and like it just didn't feel like something I could get behind. But then, jumping into Idelic and really understanding the market and what was needed, especially at the time, and even more so now, like it was so helpful to have that driving force behind you to say, even for your own willingness to just like keep going, to say like you're actually making a difference, and hearing customers talk about the difference you're making, talking to the drivers that you're ultimately helping get home safely each night, like those are the kind of experiences that helped. And then obviously you add on to that, man, recruiting, so important. Recruiting is the lifeblood of company growth and startups. Like you have to recruit phenomenal talent, and as a startup you're always battling the ability to compensate versus the ability to hire good talent. And so having that mission really helps to overcome a good bit of any kind of gap that you might find. Doing something that is cool and from a technological standpoint, innovative is obviously another huge point to help you get across that. But man, yeah, you're exactly right. That mission driven focus is super important. At least it was for us.
Yeah, it definitely helped attract the right talent for sure. That and having employees that will stalk your potential hires. I know that word.
Listen, at all costs, if you find the right talent, you got to go get them.
I respect the hustle.
Showing up to people's weddings.
It was my birthday party, but it's fine.
Oh, my bad.
Okay, no. You mentioned a couple things I do want to circle back on, but the first is you did touch on like try 1 and 2 were short-lived and maybe not, those skyrocketing successes that you thought they might have been on inception. So my question is, when you look at Idelic, what did you do differently here versus the previous ones that ultimately led to the success that you can help other entrepreneurs not make those mistakes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, like it's one of those where I wish I could have learned from others' mistakes, but for me, being as, thick as I am, I think I needed to kind of have some of the battle scars to be able to take and be a little bit more productive at Idelic. But I think the ultimate thing that was the biggest differentiator between Idelic and some of the others that I tried to start up previous was just a better understanding of our customers and our problem, and our customers and their problems. I think that's obviously the precursor to product market fit, but you have to have an intimate understanding of your customers, their day-to-day lives, the nuances between different roles at a particular customer, what they care about, what is most pressing for them, and then you've got to just absolutely live and understand their pain points. Yeah, so one of the biggest things, in talking about Nebulous, for example, which is a music technology company, we had this great passion for what we were doing. We had phenomenal technology. It was something that was really cool and interesting, but we didn't have a clear understanding of who we were actually selling to. Who are the users? Like, who's actually going to use this thing? Right? I think honestly, we had some conflicting views even within our founding team. Now, I will say that one of the biggest mistakes that we made was having 7 co-founders. Do not do that. That is a terrible recipe for disaster. So that was one of the things that made it a little bit challenging. We just had a lot of really passionate people who were excited about a similar challenge in a similar industry, and we all kind of jumped in on it together. But we didn't have a clear understanding of who we were actually trying to sell to, who we were actually trying to market to, who's going to be using the product, what use cases, why would they fork up any kind of money to do this, or how could we get the viral growth and acceleration that you need to take advantage of some of the other strategies for monetization. So it was a challenge because we kind of we floundered around and we spent too much time building product and not enough time understanding our customer. And so that's where we spun our wheels a lot. Then again, like similarly, when we went into Hyliion and some of the different avenues that we were going in from a EV in the trucking space, right? Like we knew and understand that there was a big problem, but again, obviously, like one of the biggest ticket items that you have on a P&L at a trucking fleet is their fuel costs. And so we knew that this was a huge issue, and we knew that there was ROI to be had, but we didn't have a deep enough understanding of the maintenance processes and kind of what that looks like when it comes to tractor trailers. We didn't have a deep enough understanding of the operational onset of how outfitting a trailer with certain technology would affect overall revenue because there's so many more trailers than tractors. There's just so many different nuances that not being in the industry made it a little bit challenging to kind of get off the ground. Now, there was a lot of progress made there, but I think those are some of the things that for us, it kind of hindered some of the growth in the early days. Now, jumping into Idelic, I wanted to make sure that I had a much better understanding of what was actually happening. So I was actually working as a consultant for a trucking firm, Pit Ohio Express, phenomenal group, excellent people. And during that time, I was able to spend an inordinate amount of time like getting to know the market. I had over 100 phone calls with 100 different fleets, from 15 driver mom and pops all the way up to UPS. Like it's crazy the level of reach that you can get when you're playing the research card or student looking for some information. Like everyone is open when you're trying to like learn about their industry and learn about what they do. People love it. And so you can get access and reach, but you got to do the work. Like you got to put in the time and energy, and it's not just a couple calls. It's a lot, hundreds of phone calls and in interviews and meetings, and then going out and seeing, I went out and visited, truck stops. I went out and visited terminals at different fleets, and it was very, very eye-opening to see. I could start to pick out certain patterns of issues that were pervasive at each of these different sizes and demographics of fleets. No one had an answer for, right? In my case, it was they had so much data from so many different disparate systems that they were all liable for in court. Driver gets into a crash, plaintiff's attorneys are going in and grabbing all this information and trying to paint some terrible picture of why this fleet is awful. So they have all this data, but they couldn't use it to be proactive and predictive and helpful at preventing crashes, just because it wasn't connected. No good way at being prescriptive. And this was back in 2016, before AI and machine learning was really cool. And so and honestly, it was one of the bigger advantages, but also challenges that we faced throughout our tenure at Idelic. Was we were cutting edge. Like we were doing things and trying to essentially bring things to market that fleets, our customers, have never seen before, never really thought about before. And so we were category creators and having to do a lot of education to get any type of momentum in sales and marketing efforts. So it was really interesting, but like that level of groundwork that we laid in the early days of just understanding our customers, understanding the nuance between safety and risk and compliance and operations, and who does what and why, and when things become important, who has the budget, who would be the ultimate ones like signing a contract, what do those contracts typically look like, and what are people generally okay with when it comes to SaaS contracts in the trucking industry. So all those were things that we had to learn and discover, and we did that before we ever started the company. And so that was, I think, one of the things that really helped lay the biggest groundwork.
Yeah, and it's very interesting too, because there's a lot of MBAs that listen here, and it's like, okay, when you do have a true blue ocean, I think we are kind of taught that like it's something that you're going to discover yourself in your day-to-day life, which if you are a serial entrepreneur, that's not always going to be the case. Maybe with your first startup in the music world, but I know you weren't a trucker. This wasn't, something you knew a lot about of going into. And so all of that research at the forefront is really important. You made some really good points. Like, it's not just, is there a product market fit? But what is the process? What is the buying process of these people? What is like the typical budget of these companies? And so it is really interesting. Like, you have to dive in and like get under their skin and really understand like the dynamics of these types of companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think just being able to, being able to identify a problem is so hard. Like, it is not easy. Like, when people always think about like, oh, I want to start a company, I want to get into entrepreneurship, like that sounds so fun and so sexy. Like, first and foremost, starting a company is really freaking hard, and it is not for the faint of heart, and I would not recommend it to the vast majority of people. It is not easy. Just ask my wife and kids. Like, there was many years where I was not as present as I would have liked, and it was just because I was always on and always working. But I think the biggest thing is to have a good understanding of the problem set. You have to, or even to have an understanding that there is a problem. Like, you've got to be in that world. And so thankfully at the time I was in that world strictly because I was working as a consultant for the trucking industry. And one of the projects they had me look at was their internal safety process, their internal safety tool that they had built to try to solve some of these problems. And then they were asking, like, what do we do with this? What can we do with this? What are other people doing? And so that's what kind of like got me into that mindset and started to go down those paths and started to pull those threads. And the more and more I dove in, the more I realized that how impactful and important this was. But if I wasn't there or hadn't had that opportunity to dig in, I would have never known that this was even an issue. Right? And I think that's, especially when you look at B2B SaaS companies, especially when you look at vertical SaaS companies, which I wholeheartedly believe that vertical SaaS companies, especially in sleepy or non-sexy markets, are incredibly valuable and fantastic places to create products and start companies. But you gotta know it and you gotta live it. So you kind of like, it's catch-22 a little bit. You have to be kind of in that arena, understand some of the issues and challenges, and then be able to think through an idea like, how can I make this better?
Yeah.
Like, how can I leverage new technology? Now, obviously, with the boon in AI, like, there's so much opportunity, but I think that also brings some challenge, because now almost anyone can jump in and learn something like a Claude code and build their own little apps and do their own things. And so, like, some of the things that we're running into now is even trucking fleets thinking that, hey, we can just build something like this on our own, right? And so those are some of the things that you have to compete against. But again, I think there's just really, really good opportunity. But to your point, you have to be in it. You have to know where those problem sets lie, and then be able to jump in and dig in and find out more about it, be an expert in that arena, and then be able to provide products and solutions that fit the need.
Yeah, and I think product market fit is a little more complex than what we think of up front right away, because it's not, there could be a demand for something. You could have a product that everybody says is cool, like, wow, that's interesting, that's cool, but there has to be the right type of demand, the urgency. When I'm doing workshops, that's one of the biggest things that I coach on, is when we're figuring out our value propositions and how we're positioning our product, how do we also position it in a point of urgency to where this decision needs to be made now, not next month, not next year. Yeah. And it's something you're going to use, especially with SaaS, because if it's not used, you're going to lose. So I guess, what were some of the earliest signals for you that there was a product market fit? How did that adapt? Did you trust those right away? Were you skeptical? Like, where was your head at early days with product market fit?
Yeah. This is product market fit is such an interesting topic. And one of the things I will say right out of the gate is you're probably going to have two conversations, one internal and one external, right? Externally, your job is to highlight and sell how your traction and the signal that you're getting from the market is indicating product market fit. You're selling that to other customers. You're selling that to investors. You're selling that to the market at large. Like you're always selling that, hey, we're moving, we're cooking, we're in it. Like things are generating, things are moving, right? But then internally, you don't want to drink the Kool-Aid, right? You want to be very, very cautious and look for all the signals. Obviously, you can't be too negative, right? You can't be too Debbie Downer and like think the sky's falling all the time, because then you're going to make bad decisions and not trust certain signals that are real. But you have to be clear with yourself as far as like, what do we need product market fit to look like? And being, obviously, like, this was our third time. This was ultimately my first B2B SaaS. This was my first real like growth experience. And so I think at times, I think we took some of the signal a little bit too at face value, and didn't dig deep enough. And we were super excited about certain things. And honestly, like some of the time, like we took, whether it was founder magic or whether it was just, some, brute force, bare knuckle boxing out in the market. And we took some of the successes that we had and we counted it as really strong product market fit. Now, did we start to see early signals? Absolutely. But were there things that we needed to dig into more and really clean up and really understand better as to why certain deals were closing, why others weren't? Yes. Now, to your ultimate question, like, what did we see as early signs of product market fit? Did we trust those? For us, the earliest signal of product market fit was the product that Pitt, Ohio had created internally, that even when created by a trucking company whose first job is not creating software, they built something that they used to great success, and they even sold to other fleets along the way. And so obviously there was a problem big enough to jump into here. People were willing to part with hard-earned money to pay for and solve those types of issues. And the product didn't have to be, the product wasn't super sexy at the onset of what they had initially built, and people were still buying it. So in our minds, like, that was great initial signal. And then as we started to build out our iteration of the product, because we ended up building that from the ground up, we didn't really use anything from the prior system. We built everything on our own. And as we started to go through, and I think this was, again, some really good early signal, not necessarily product market fit, but more so that of problem market fit, which was we would get on phone calls with fleets who self-proclaimed as non-innovators, non-early buyers, like very much like, hey, we come in after the fact, like when everything's already done and saying, we had conversations with them with slide decks, not actual software, fully knowing that like none of this was built yet. And we got cheering from the other side of the phone. Like people would literally go on and cheer and get excited and like rally around the topics that we were talking about, just because like, hey, these are things that we can solve, and they would get so jazzed up. And so those are the kind of things that like pushed us forward in the early days. And then when we started to jump on and actually create a product and actually get into customers' hands, we started to see good momentum, right? Like it was not easy. It was hard fought wins as we would go through this, but it started to snowball. And as the product continued to develop and we got more and more polished in our offering. And again, one of the things that was a challenge to us at the onset, having spun out of a large trucking company, we were expected to have an enterprise grade solution from day one. And so we spent a lot of time getting to that enterprise grade solution, having all of these different feature sets. Instead of like really nailing one and then expanding over time, we had to kind of have this whole basket of things, of compliance and data integrations and predictive analytics and coaching workflows and all these different pieces, right? And so that made it challenging. And so from a product standpoint, we built things and then moved on to the next thing before that thing was like fully like polished off and strong, just because we had to, right? And that caused things to break and caused things to be issues. And then it was just this constant game of prioritization. And it is the lot that we had drawn to be able to start off like we did, but it was a challenge. Now, I will say this is one of the things that, looking back in hindsight, I've definitely learned, and I wish I was more cognizant of in the early days, is you can have good product market fit, but then the market might change.
Yep.
And so I feel like we had really good product market fit, especially through the first 3, 4, 5 years. And then the market changed. And at that point, we didn't change fast enough. And I think that was a struggle for quite a while. And when I say the market changed, trucking, being in the trucking and transportation industry, like, you're kind of going through their cycles. They had, and quite honestly, still kind of going through a huge trucking recession. So we're going on 4 years now, and the trucking market is kind of in this low trough, and it's going to bounce back. We're starting to see good signs, which is awesome for our customers and for the industry as a whole. But like, when that market started to change, we didn't change fast enough in understanding that beforehand we were a need to have. But then when money is tight and when things change, safety, unfortunately, becomes a nice to have. Yeah. At least investing in new safety technology, right? Fleets will always tell you safety is important. However, when money is tight, that's where they started to cut back. Well, that's where they started to cut back. And so in doing that, we didn't shift fast enough, which, hindsight was an issue. So that's one of the things when you talk about product market fit, it is fluid. And if you don't keep that in mind, you could very well have it change and slip out from under you and not be reactive enough.
Yeah, I mean, for startups on the line, that's something that is almost a benefit to what we do, because every day is like a panic, and you're building the plane as you're flying it, and you're 10 steps behind at all times, it feels like. But at the same time, because of that, you're able to be agile. We all understand the concept of being agile when we are building a product. And so as a result, you're able to pivot quickly and kind of change what you're doing. I mean, when we look at some of the most successful companies out there, and startups, a lot of them weren't built originally for what they ended up being. I think it like Facebook was like a university communication tool. Yep. Netflix was, Redbox, I don't know what it was before that. I mean, you see some of the most successful companies just completely pivoting and almost being completely different than what they originally intended to be. So I guess, do you have any other advice? You've mentioned times where you kind of wished that you would reposition because it moves so quickly. Are there any signs that you would look for where you could say, now is, like, don't dig your heels in. This is a sign. I know you've spent 3 years building this, 4 years building this, 5 years building this. Don't dig your heels in. This is a good sign that you need to pivot or tweak. Are there any indicators or kind of tips that you would give listeners? Yeah,
it's a good question. So it's a delicate line to balance, right? Because there's, the old Henry Ford quote, if I asked my customers what they want, they would say faster horses.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's a level and a degree to which you as a founder need to see things that your customers don't. Lead them to a future and a state in which they didn't know they could achieve or didn't know they wanted. But I think it all is grounded and rooted in the ultimate problems that you're trying to solve. And so, one, asking your customers, what are the big problems and issues you're trying to solve? Are we solving them effectively today? In your mind, what are other adjacent problems or other issues that might be even more valuable to solve? Like, what do you need to be fixed? And I think that is a really important piece. And then your job is to be able to say, how can we fix those problems more effectively? And I think one of the things that we did well in the early days, again, we spun out of a trucking company. We looked at a product that they had already built, that they had already sold, right? So we knew that there was commercial value to what they had already, essentially the track that they were already on. We knew that there was already value there. And looking at that original solution, it was very compliance focused. Can I log and track data? Can I manage government portal access and some of the things that are necessary from a regulatory standpoint, and managing the qualification files of a driver, and all of those kinds of things, right? So all very tactical. And one of the things that we started to look at was, hey, like, we have a lot of this data now, and our customers are asking us to tie in and integrate to these other systems to get them more data and more visibility. What can we do with that? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the best pivots that we made, it wasn't astronomical in the sense of like going from completely different thing to a completely different thing, but we definitely pivoted from a compliance data management focus to a data aggregation, predictive analytics, and data analysis company. Yeah. Right. And I think that was super helpful for us in a couple ways. One, it was super helpful for our customers because it kept us in the forefront and in a space that was much more open and greenfield for us. But also, it was really important for us as we were going out to raise money. And it was a move almost necessitated because of some of the investment thesis that was out there at the time. And so this is one, like, as you're starting to, I know we're not talking about fundraising quite yet, but as you're starting to think about fundraising, like, this is one, again, fine line, but you have to think, and are there things and directions that you want to go that would help to, one, advance your product and make you a better company for your customers, but two, also advance your ability to go out and raise. Mm-hmm. And so it is like, you don't want to do things strictly because of investors. That will inevitably lead to disaster, right? But there is kind of that Venn diagram of, is it helpful for my customer? Is it helpful to go raise more money? Then let's do that. And that's kind of, for us, like, it definitely worked out that way, where we're sitting here thinking like, hey, we're a compliance company. Like, no. Like, we are a machine learning data analytics company. Yeah. Right. And I had conversations internally with co-founders and stuff. I'm like, but that's not what we do. I'm like, but that's what we need to do. Right. And that was the turning point, I think, for us, in like really pushing that idea and that narrative of, we might not do it today, but from a branding, marketing, and speaking it into existence standpoint, that's what we started doing. And I know, Gina, you were a big, not just proponent, but a huge catalyst in that, in the early days when we started to go from that compliance focused into that arena of, no, we're predictive analytics, we're machine learning, we're allowing you to pinpoint which driver is most at risk and do something about it. Like, that shift was fundamental to us as a company, and it came because we saw not just that the customers needed it, but we had all the ingredients to be able to do something that hasn't been done before.
Yeah. And I think, well, thank you for the shout out. I also think that there is a value, and this goes for investors as well as customers, that you're not just selling your product based on the value that they need, but there's this whole like perceived demand that you really have to pay attention to. And in the early days, AI was what was going to get you Series A funding, was what was going to get you through Series B funding. By being an AI company, that's what they get excited about. So you have to think of like where an investor's head's at. And even for some of the fleets that are more forward thinking, ooh, AI, we need to get ahead of this, we need to be on this. That might not even be the main tool they need, but that's what they think they need, so that we deliver to them the compliance tools that make it sticky and retain that product, but you're selling on some of those flashier things. So that's the funny thing about demand too, is understanding who stakes claim in what, and what does that mean for what do we build to get us to this next level, but what do we keep to make this product as valuable as possible.
Yeah, no, that's really, really well said. And I think that's a huge part of this whole thing is customers, and especially VCs, like they have certain theses that they're really digging into. And if you're in that thesis, then man, like, you're hot and you are super sexy and exciting. And for in the early days, it was very challenging because everyone was moving towards autonomous vehicles, right? So in the trucking and transportation space, autonomous vehicles was a hot ticket item. You had all of these investments going into all these different solutions around AV or connected vehicle. And so because that was such a big topic, people would look at us and say, what are you guys going to do when drivers aren't going to be in the cab in 3 years? And I'm like, time out. And again, granted, this is 10 years ago. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's just so funny where, like, in those are conversations in the early days, like, we're trying to, like, shimmy and jive around these calls and, like, oh, no, but, like, well, like, if you ask industry experts, and, oh, no, we can still be the platform for the, like, now, it's like anyone says that, it's like, guys, obviously, you don't know the industry.
We've all watched Back to the Future. We know how this goes.
Exactly. It's like, obviously, you don't know the industry. So if that's your position, we're just not going to be a good fit for you. And then you just move on, right?
Yeah.
That's obviously a luxury that you can have after you've raised a couple rounds or you've done it before. You know, but in the early days, we didn't have that luxury. But it was uphill. It was an uphill battle. But yeah, that perceived demand is really key, and so it's again that's a important part of marrying product roadmap, and right now, even in kind of what we do and what we provide, a lot of it is it's marketing is more so important than actual like product delivery, because as long as your product solves the problem that they're looking for, you can market it in certain ways, like AI forward or predictive analytics or whatever the case is. And obviously it has to do those things, but you can market it in much heavier focus on the AI piece than, say, just the general data integration or data collection, even though the customer is getting the vast majority of the value derived from just simple things like data integration or compliance or overall workflow. But the AI tooling or the predictive analytics can definitely, like, you can have that shine.
Right. I mean, we're always selling the future. I think we could do a whole episode on like what that means early stage and how the perception of your company and how you present yourself is vastly different than what goes on behind the curtain. The wizard in the back is actually just the CEO and founder, like taping boxes shut at conferences and like pitching product features that are like, skeptically on the way soon. So.
Listen, I heard that it's coming at some point.
You know, it's funny because the head of engineering said this word the other day, so it's definitely, we have that. It's definitely
we can do that.
We ask forgiveness, not permission sometimes around here. So I wanna pivot out of fundraising because you made some really good points, and again, I think I could talk about that for days. But something very unique that we did with you at Idelic was we built you, I would say, a pretty strong founder brand in your industry. So, we're talking about trucking, which is, a pretty, again, not super sexy space, but we were able to really give you a face and a personality that was recognizable. And that really helped, support marketing, support sales, and also garner us more trust in the industry. So I would say, like, in general, what made you decide to lean into that, but also more comfortable leaning into, like, slapping your face on trucking and being the mascot for our company?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, this is such an important thing that I don't think people give enough credit or credence to. You as a founder, especially if you are the vocal, like, out in front into the market founder. For me, it was because I started it, but also I had the industry knowledge and expertise. I came from the industry, and so those were the things that kind of gave me some of the tooling. But man, like, as a category creator, as a vertical SaaS player, as someone who is trying to build credibility and credence, you've got to offer something to the industry. You can't just pitch your product. You can't just talk about your thing. You've got to actually drive insight that people are going to care about. And so that was one of the things that I feel like, obviously, Gina, you and the team did a phenomenal job supporting. But I'll say, like, as the founder, I had to really drive thought leadership throughout the industry. We were saying things that had never been said before. We were saying things that could have been perceived as fairly controversial at the onset. But now, looking back, everything that we were saying is gospel today. And in the market that you're in, regardless of whether it's trucking or telecommunication or sales, whatever, doesn't matter. You've got to be able to cut through the noise and provide something unique and new and fresh and something that's perceived as like actually educational to the market. So a couple examples, so for us, and your listeners probably aren't going to give two flying flips about like the specifics here, but just to give you an example to like make this a little bit more concrete and real, like in a safety organization, you have the safety team, but you also have the operations teams. The operations teams are the ones who are actually out, like making sure drivers are dispatched, making sure the loads get there on time. And they really care about wheels turning and drivers' retention. That's what they care about. They typically, historically, did not care about safety. Safety was the principal's office who would call and like, hey, we saw you were speeding, a couple of times on your camera today, your telematics today. So like, hey, like you really need to slow down. Like it was like this. There's this always constant struggle and tension between safety and operations, and so we started to champion this idea of operationalizing safety, and we would start to make claims and talk about things like, listen, everyone says that they have a strong safety culture, but if you don't have your operations team's members engaged in safety, having safety conversations, having goals and metrics within the safety, like within safety arena, like if you don't have those, then you don't have a strong safety culture. Like that's a bold statement. And so we were saying that because again, like there's so many more operations team members and safety team members, like it just made sense. Like we had talk tracks around this and I would go on and do webinars about this. Gina, you got me into a lot of the trade shows and speaking speaking on the floor about on all these different topics. And like, it was, there were some people that would like quietly, like give me the fist bump, like, yeah, man, that's what I'm talking about. All right, someone's finally saying these things. And then there were other people that are like, I don't agree with that. And so like, but what it did is it started a conversation and it placed me and us consequently as a brand as the people who are talking about these concepts and these things that are incredibly important within the industry. We kept getting asked to come speak. We went on speaking tours in the early days. Man, I was able to get my ugly face in front of everybody because we were talking about things that weren't typically brought up. Yeah. Then we started to jump into the predictive analytics stuff, talking about all these different areas in which we were educating people. And it was really fun for me to be able to get in front of a customer. Like we went on site to UPS and we had 8 or 9 hour like meetings back to back, and the whole time it was like educating them on what they should be doing, how safety should be working with operations, how safety team members should be not just looking at their camera data, but looking at all these other pieces of data, how they should be incorporating predictive analytics, how they should be coaching, not in one-off events, but on holistic, what we call professional development plans. Again, the things that like, if you're not in the industry, like it's not going to matter to you, but to them, they were novel and unique ideas that we were pushing in the early days, and it gave us credence and it gave us the clarity to go in and now have the platform to talk about what we do, right? So we were never and it was really important that we were never pushing our product. We were pushing concepts and ideas that our product helped to solve.
Right. And I think that that's like a very organic pairing when you have a category creator, because part of your job is to educate the industry on problems that they might not necessarily realize that they have. So it came very naturally for us to educate, but also put a face to it, which I think we were very ahead of the curve in that. When 2020 hit and everyone went virtual, people were looking for human connection, and you start to see like people selling to people more often than just like a faceless product. And so I do think that we were ahead of that curve. For sure. And that was a big part of, again, I think that there's a trust piece there too. Unfortunately, AI, up until more recently even, and even still, it is a bit of a black box. It doesn't necessarily, we can't exactly explain the secret sauce because it's rather technical, and not a lot of people understand that piece. And so it is, you had to sort of build that credibility in your space. And so I guess when you're talking to founders who are listening to this, who are maybe in not so exciting or tech forward industries, they might say, this wouldn't work for us. They're antiquated. It's not right for our space. What would you say to them, and do you have advice for them?
Yeah. First off, I would say, have you heard of trucking? So I think, whether it's like, hey, like our customers would never go for something like this because we are so backwards or tech averse, or even if it's like, hey, like this might be great for category creators but wouldn't work for us, like our category is already well established and we're just fighting for space, doing something kind of new and innovative. Like in any of those scenarios, building a personal brand and educating your customers, educating the market on what they should be doing is essential. Have to. You've got to do it. And as a founder, it's your job. There's no one else there that knows. Okay, there shouldn't be anyone else there that knows your customers better, knows your market better, knows the problem set better than you. And if you don't feel comfortable at doing that, you better get comfortable, because that's a huge part of what you should be doing. But more importantly, that's a huge advantage that you can have at every stage of the game. At the growth stage, at being able to bring on new customers, but also even on a selfish standpoint, towards the end game, right? Like again, post acquisition, if you're not looked to as the industry expert, you're doing yourself a disservice, because now you can't help whoever's buying you bring that industry expertise into their new organization, but two, your personal brand goes down. So you've got to be able to educate your customer base, because if you don't educate your customer base, they won't know the important nuances of why they should buy your product or why they should care about the problem you're trying to solve. So even if you're in a market that's already pretty saturated, right? There's multiple big competitors and you're just trying to come in and take market share. Obviously, if you're doing that, it's because you've got something new or innovative or novel, right? So think about what your product solves specifically, why you're different, and then educate your customer base or educate the market on why that specific thing is so much more important than anything else that anyone can do, right? And if you can help educate and bring understanding and highlight, like, hey, this particular part of your job or this particular part of the problem is more painful than anything else, or provides more opportunity for ROI than anything else. Like if you can convince and highlight those things, selling your product is going to be infinitely easier because they now care about the problem set. Then your product can shine because you say, oh, you now know that you need to do this? Great. Here's a tool that makes it 10 times easier to do that thing.
Yep, absolutely. And I want to say too, this isn't just a social media play. This isn't just speaking at events. There's a lot of personal interactions that you can be doing. So I guess for listeners, what are some practical ways to build your founder brand? Because when you're a founder, you're doing 50 other things. You don't have time to be focused on just branding yourself. If you're going to have a successful product. And so I guess what are some practical steps that they can take to be more efficient with it? Because again, I can't stress this enough. There are people who have jobs dedicated to building founder brands for you. So what would be your advice as someone who did it fully organic with the help of a couple marketers or two behind the scenes?
Yeah. I mean, obviously the team is super critical to this. So that's what it can't be just you. But I think the biggest thing that you can do as a founder is make sure that you're constantly learning your own space.
Yeah.
You've got to be constantly investing in your own understanding of the space. You've got to constantly be looking at what needs to change, and you need to just constantly be talking to your prospects and customers. Because when you're talking to them, you can bounce these ideas off of them. You can A/B test, right? There are so many times that I jumped on sales calls with our sales guys, or their sales team members, and being able to jump in and say, hey, like, what have you ever thought of this, and this? What is and then you can start to say, well, what we've found with our customers is when they do this, then these things happen. Like, is that interesting to you? Like, you can start to go in and ultimately workshop these types of thought leadership pieces or through lines and get reactions. You get 3 or 4 or 5 of them in a row that are positive, or at least generate some good reaction. Then you put out a blog post, or then you put out a thought piece, or then you jump on, like Gina. One of the things that you did, which was phenomenal, that was a huge success. We still do it today. We created 60 seconds of safety, right? And again, do we release this on social? Yes, but this was more so something that was a content piece for us, and a great way to continue to push our narrative. And so ultimately, like, every week, couple weeks, we would put out 60 seconds was a very liberal time frame, as you can tell.
We tried our hardest to keep it.
As you can tell, I struggle being concise, but the 97 seconds of safety was always great.
Generous.
No, but also generous. So we had these pieces, these bits that, like, the industry started to expect to hear from us. And it was always something, never Idelic specific, never our product specific, but it was always like things that we heard in industry, things that our customers were seeing, things that we wanted to talk about more broadly, or connect dots for our customers. Like, that was one example, right? And then just like being able to, in those prospect meetings, in those customer meetings, talk about and bring up certain issues and topics that were new and fresh and not traditional. And I think those were ways that I was able to build the brand of safety, like safety innovation.
Yeah.
And then that brand was synonymous with our company. Right?
Yeah.
As the founder, that brand became synonymous with our company. And we were able to punch way above our weight.
Yeah, and one tip I always give founders too is, and I really liked how you said, like, you have to know your stuff. You have to know the industry better than anyone, and that is so true. If you are as simple as attending a trade show and you're seated at a table with 7 other people, 9 other people, whatever that may be, don't be the silent one at that table, and don't be talking about yourself. I want that table of people to take away, that guy really knows his stuff. I want you to sit down and watch a presentation and have commentary and have your own opinions. And we can kind of brief you going into it, but kind of know before each session, here is my stance on this. Here is kind of my take on it. It doesn't have to be the most unique take ever, but you have to have something. And then be willing to speak up and talk about. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, technical founders out there, but you do have to be somewhat of a social butterfly in order to start to really build that in the industry.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And this is one of the things that, as a founder, especially if you're trying to build that personal brand, if you're trying to be the one to push those initiatives out, like, it can't be just a rote prescriptive thing that you do online. It's got to be something that you live day to day. You've got to be at all the trade shows. You've got to be at all the industry events. You've got to be in front of your customers. You've got to be out in the field with your sales team, going and talking to prospects. You might be your own sales team. Like, you've got to be out, and it's got to be something that you're spot on. Like, it is so easy to go to these events and then just stick to your booth and then not really do anything else outside of that. It's like, oh, boothing hours are done. I'm going to go hang in a hotel. I'm going to go get something to eat or whatever. Like, no, you got to go to the sessions. You got to be involved. Like, I'm on 3 or 4 different boards at 3 or 4 different, different trade organizations. Like, you go to this different roundtable sessions. I I made a mistake one time, and I didn't know. But like they have safety in the rounds discussions, and there's like an inner circle and then a bunch of chairs on the outside. The inner circle is for fleets to talk about fleet specific things. And I was walking in with one of our customers, and I just sat down next to him in the middle of this bad boy. And then I kind of got a couple like weird looks, and then people like made a few comments I didn't fully understand. And then the session got going.
You accidentally.
Oh, okay. The second time I did it was not an accident. The first time was.
We just kept doing that. That was a great spotlight.
Well, it was so interesting because like in those sessions, like you got to know and understand. No one wants to hear you pitch, so shut up and don't talk about your product. But people do want to hear your insights. If you have good insights to give, people love to hear. And so it was an interesting in that same session. Like there were 3 or 4 times where I was able to jump in and be like, hey, that's really interesting. This is what we see with our customer base. And because we as vendors have a unique perspective and we have a broad understanding of what our customer base does and uses. And so being able to share that insight was really helpful. And I had people come up to me after like, man, that's really interesting. I've never thought of it that way before. And like we would walk out of the session and talk and then, exchange business cards. And now, and then, you jump, you're setting up meetings for after the show. It's like, those are the kind of things you have to be involved.
Yeah.
You've got to be in it. And you've got to get out of your shell. And it's exhausting. Trust me. Like it is tiring because you're always on. And I don't care if you're an extrovert, introvert, doesn't matter. Like it is exhausting. But you have to be engaged and you have to be willing to speak up about industry things, not about your product.
Yep. And I would say too, to the trade show point, just like to touch on that again, like if you're in an industry, like at an association event or something, your booth is the least likely place you're going to be making meaningful connections and closing deals. In my brain, your booth exists for a logo recognition. We need that 7 times to remember who you are, and also that perception again. We might be an 8-person company, but if we can really blow budget and get this massive booth and convince people, look, we're much bigger than you think, FOMO, you're missing out on something everyone else has. Those are the goals of the booth in my mind.
Yeah.
Because if nowadays, I don't even think you get most attendees through the exhibit hall at these shows. And so they might do a once around quickly. They're avoiding the vendors like the plague. They don't even want your pen anymore because they're afraid you're going to come up to them like those guys in the middle of the mall selling hand lotion. So it's like there's a goal for it and there's value in it, but you're not making connections there. You need to be at all the meals and you need to be talking to people like 100%.
100%. And then I'll even say like just as an aside for just trade show benefit, like do your pre-work. Like get the list of who all the attendees and then call everyone as many times as you need to get a hold of them and just say, hey, we're going to be there. We'd love for you to stop by the booth. And then just get some sort of commitment, even if it's very non-committal, just like come by the booth, just say hi to us. We've gotten a lot of benefit that way, but you're exactly right. Like just sitting at your booth is not going to generate the kind of results you want. You've got to get out where the people are. The people are meeting with their friends and buddies in the hallway, at the drink station, at the food station. Like you got to get out. Yep,
absolutely. Well, we are coming up on time here, so I want to throw one more big question at you. What is one lesson from this exit that you think that early stage founders should hear, or what's kind of like one piece of advice that you can't stress enough for all of those founders out there with ambitions of being successful, making an exit someday?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the biggest thing is be super conscientious of your growth strategy, right? Make sure that you feel very, very confident in the metrics and the product market fit that result from said metrics before you start to really pour on gas and before you really start to like ramp up and scale up. Because I think cash is king, right? Like being able to have a really strong cash position, being able to last longer without needing to go fundraise, being able to be in a position to be more agile because you have the cash on hand to do so. Super important. I think we got caught one time in particular where we saw some signals and we got some advice and guidance to just ramp up and grow, gas it, let's go, gas it, let's go. And so we scaled up way bigger than we should have. And we had to eventually kind of scale back down, which was tough. But that, obviously hurt us in our cash position, hurt us in kind of how we went to market after that. And so I wish we would have been a little bit more cognizant and thoughtful in hitting the stage gates and milestones, holding on to the cash position that we had and be able to scale a little bit more effectively. Again, those are all hindsight pieces, but hopefully something that you guys can take away as well.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. I appreciate that. So for folks who want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, that is a great question. You can go. Hayden at Idelic.com is still a good place, but that's going to be obviously changing. Yeah, as of now, that's going to be changing a little.
How about your LinkedIn? We'll link it in the description below.
Yeah, LinkedIn in the description below, but that's probably the best place.
Yeah, I have a good inkling that there's some big things coming out of Hayden Cardiff here over the next couple years. So keep your eyes peeled, and I'm sure it'll be an exciting ride to follow. So.
I appreciate it. Well, Gina, thank you so much for having me. This has been phenomenal. Hopefully it's been helpful for you and the listeners, but really appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining me. This has been a blast, as always. We'll see you next time.